This video here is all about dot and column graphs. So previous videos we've learned how to collect data. Now we're going to start to actually represent that data using graphic representations. Now our KUDs for this lesson is that students will be able to understand that data can be represented graphically. You also need to make sure you can interpret and analyze data that is represented graphically. You'll be able to construct them as well. So if you're given data, you can be able to construct a dot and column graph, and also need to know the meaning of dot plots or graphs, column graphs, and also what an outlier is. So let's get straight into it. And before we begin, I'm going to get you to look at these two images here. I want you to pause the video and I want you to write down any similarities or differences you see. So just look at those two images there, or those graphs, and just note down the similarities and differences. And then once you've done that, come back and we'll look at them. So what we see here is that we have one representing the dot graph and also the column graph. Now they're both sort of representing the same thing. They've taken data from, I guess, a class's favorite color. Now they're the same thing, however they're represented differently. You'll notice the key things here that we understand. So the dot graphs, see how they don't have a scale here on the left? So what happens is that each one of these dots represents one. Represents one datum, which we use as information, whereas compared to the column graph, the heights of the graph represent the total value, wherever they line up in regards to that axis and how many they have. So dot graphs, they have each dot represents one, where the column graphs can sort of change depending on the height and also depending on the scale that we have here on the left. So let's look in particular about the key things you need to have. So we know that a dot plot can be used to display data, where each dot represents one. A column graph is an alternative way to show data in different categories and is useful with more than a few items of data to represent. So these ones here are particularly good for using discrete data, not continuous. So you'll see, we've got different red, green, yellow, blue. It's they're different categories. Column graphs can also be drawn vertically or horizontally, and they've got to have the following features. Now make sure you draw this representative down here in your books. So these are the key things you need to have. You need to have a title. You need to label each of the axes. So if we have 5, 10, 15, 20, what is that? Is that monkeys? I don't know what that means. So make sure you label it, for example, how many number of students. You also need to label the types of categories that we have so we can represent them. And as I mentioned, you also need to make sure that you have that title. Now, any numerical axes should be drawn to scale. So you'll see here these should be even in between each of these scales. And finally, as our KUD at the top said, you need to know what an outlier is. So an outlier, and write this down, is a value that is noticeably distinct from the main cluster of points. So in this example of this dot graph, see how we have the main cluster of points, and then we have this random one out here. That's what we call an outlier, and they're sort of unique in regards to what we need to do there. So now we're going to answer some questions. I'll try and do this as quickly as I can for you, and then you can go off and start doing your work. So the questions here, we're going to interpret a graph here. So the dot plot below represents the results of a survey that asks some children how many pets they have at home. Question 1, use the graph to state how many children have 2 pets. Okay, so I'm going to find the number of pets here, and remember each one of these dots is 1, so 1 datum, so I know my answer here is 4. B, how many children participated in this survey? I'll have a quick count for you. Okay, I calculated or added up a total of 22 people were involved in this survey. What is the range of values? So remember, the range is the smallest and the highest numbers, the difference between there. So 8 minus 0 equals 8, so our range is 8. What is the median number of pets? So again, median means the middle. Now I know that there's going to be 22. There's 22 in total, so half of that is 11. So let me quickly get to the 11th number there. Okay, so I've crossed off each of those, so I've got to my 11. Now I know that it is an even number, so the middle is going to be these two here. Okay, so we've got 11, the other one is going to be 11, added together, divided by 2 equals 11. That's how we get our median. What is the outlier? Okay, so again, remember we've got this main cluster and then we have this random one over here. So our outlier is 8. And what is the mode? MO means most often, which one appears most often, and we can see clearly in a dot graph that it is 1. 1 is what occurs most often. Now you need to make sure that you can construct graphs as well, so we're going to do that quickly here with example 5. Draw a column graph to represent the following people's heights. So I'm going to quickly construct that, and then I'll tell you how we did that. Alright, here is a constructed column graph. Now see, I've got all those features that I made sure I needed to have. So I've got my title. I have labeled each of my axes with what those are. So remember, if you're doing a measurement, you need to make sure you have those units in there. For example, we're using centimeters. I then have an even scale. So I looked across and I noticed that they're all sort of separated by about 20 or so. So I thought the easiest scale would be from going up in 20s from 0. And then I also labeled on the other axes here. And as you can see, I should now be able to interpret the heights of these for each one from there. So as you can see, you'll need to make sure that you can interpret and construct these two. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be moving on to different types of graphs, but make sure you have achieved each of these KUDs. Thanks, guys.